an initiative called Sustained Collaboration. And I wanted to bring the body of work that we're working on, which is really cross-sector, to the Guild, because I think a lot of the things that we are doing could be of particular interest to many of our Guild members. So I'm going to let the other speakers introduce themselves, and I'll tell you just a little bit about how we are all affiliated and what we're hoping to get out of today's webinar. So let's see, let's start with, I guess, Steph.
Hi, I'm Steph Gilmour. I'm an associate at SeaChange Capital Partners, and we manage the New York Merger and Collaboration Fund, the Greater Philadelphia Nonprofit Repositioning Fund, the Transformational Partnerships Fund, which specifically supports universities and colleges, and then the SeaChange Lodestar Fund for Nonprofit Collaboration, which supports organizations that can't approach one of the place-based initiatives. And Otha.
All right, how's it going, everybody? My name is Otha Cole, and I am the Director of Strategy and Communications for the Nonprofit Sustainability Initiative. And we are a place-based pooled fund comprised of 25 foundations, and we serve LA County. And who's next? How about Olivia?
Hello, good afternoon or good morning. I'm Olivia Benson. I'm with the Forbes Funds. We're based in Pittsburgh, and we are a nonprofit intermediary foundation designed to really build capacity among human service and community development organizations. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And I'll toss it to you, Kate.
Olivia, my name is Kate Piatt-Eckert. I use she, her pronouns. I am based in Chicago, where I am the director of the Mission Sustainability Initiative, which is a pooled fund and a program of Forefront, which is the statewide association for nonprofits and foundations. So we serve all of Illinois. And before doing this work, my background was as a theater producer, so I'm really excited to be here with my arts folks. So thanks all for welcoming us today.
Thanks, y'all. And I didn't mention this, but my current role is I'm the executive director of an organization called Austin Together, and we are a sustained collaboration fund and resource that serves the greater Central Texas area. And I will tell you more about all of the work that we do and how we could potentially be a service to many of you and partner with you as you're trying to find strategies for your organizations. All of us, in addition to some of the names you see listed on the right here that are not available to come today, are a part of something called the Sustained Collaboration Network. And we're a group of organizations from across the country that are all working towards the same thing, which is trying to increase philanthropic support and investment in sustained collaboration. And sustained collaboration really is a strategy of how we can all come together, work together, and share and partner to achieve our goals, find efficiency through collaboration. So you want to go to the next slide. So we're here today to tell you about what we do, to tell you about all the different ways strategic collaboration and sustained collaboration can emerge in your organization potentially, and have emerged for other organizations, and how these are strategies that you could use as you're trying to figure out how to sustain, scale, preserve your programs. We'll tell you about what we do, how to get involved, and how to access the funds and resources that we provide to nonprofits of all different types across the country. Oh, Steph, you're on mute.
Okay, hi. So what is a strategic partnership? So the Sustained Collaboration Network defines it as a formal, sustained collaboration that aims to preserve, expand, or improve the reach and/or efficiency of services to the community. We have three main categories that we'll be diving into today. So that's alliances and networks, shared service agreements, and integrated organizations. So we're talking about things like mergers and acquisitions, shared staffing, back office collaborations, and coalitions. While programmatic partnerships are incredibly important and are also a tool to be enhancing impact, that's not what we're talking about today. Strategic partnerships involve two or more nonprofits, and it's impacting the business model of the organizations. Generally, they require board approval, some sort of legal contract, and they're long-term and don't have an end date. we see that these partnerships often are used to increase geographic reach, provide a continuum of services to participants, often solving for a leadership transition or improving operational efficiencies. So we're going to dive deeper into these types on the following slides. But before doing that, just wanted to talk a little bit about the impact that nonprofits see who engage in this type of work. So nonprofits are often beginning the conversations because they're aiming to enhance impact and sustainability. And what we see is this really is a great tool for that. So programmatically, organizations experience expanded or enhanced programming and the ability to impact more people. We particularly see that with integrated organization models such as asset transfers, mergers, and acquisitions. We also see organizations experience increased financial sustainability and some small cost savings. So the largest areas where people see cost savings are when they're doing those shared service agreements like back office collaborations or co-locations. And then we find that oftentimes people are beginning these conversations because of a leadership transition. And so this is a tool that really can help solve leadership transition challenges and also just makes the kind of C-suite boards, program staff stronger when engaging in these types of partnerships. So we know that this type of work requires a commitment of resources, and that's tough when it's already hard enough to find resources in the sector. But these outcomes really demonstrate that it is a useful tool, and just really excited for you all to learn more about it and become more aware of the different models. So Otha, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to kick it off with the example of the first type of model. And this is something that I'm guessing everybody's familiar with in some way or form, or maybe even be a part of one or two, maybe even, the organization you're with right now. So alliances and networks. Here are a few examples. I think one not necessarily mentioned is a network. And with a lot of this stuff, it could just be a sort of a technical difference. But alliance and networks, and one thing that they have in common is out of all of the different types of collaborations, they are the least integrated. So coalition, a temporary alliance of distinct parties. I think y'all kind of know what that is. A collective impact effort. I think this one's interesting because this is typically focused on a very specific issue, or wanting to have a very specific particular outcome that might not last forever. Whereas a coalition can be sort of, perpetually, working together. Collective impact efforts typically are time limited, and movements are even a little bit more loose, right? So even here, this is something that is even the least amount of integrated. And I think organizations that are part of a movement, sometimes it can sort of pop in and pop out, sort of depending on what their capacity is at the time, and depending on what their sort of inclinations is at the time too. So a little bit hard and nebulous to define exactly what those are, but we know them when we see them too, or if you're a part of those as well. Okay, so to get a little bit more grounded, I have an example of a collective impact effort. And if y'all have questions, you can just pop it in the chat or just even just raise your hand. You can ask me. So the example that I'm bringing in from our own fund that we help fund is the Creative Jobs Collective Impact Initiative. And this was started a couple years ago with the goal of actually creating 10,000 entry-level jobs into the creative economy, specifically introducing, folks that have historically haven't had the opportunities or resources to be a part of the creative economy and having arts as a part of their actual careers in parts of LA County. So something so ambitious, is going to take more than one organization to do. And this one, I think, had a total of 32 organizations, and it's cross-sector. So that LA County agencies, they had universities that were part of it. And typically they have, almost always, they do have like a lead organization or a backbone to really be the quarterback or facilitator to handle all the administrative contracts. And that was the organization that we actually granted the funds to, and the ones that really did the heavy lifting on the applications. And they also came about in response to trying to be, instead of just completely reactive to COVID and the pandemic and the toll that took in the creative industry, they wanted to be reactive, but also proactive, not just thinking about how can we recover jobs, but how can we actually create in this, maybe there might be the a willingness to try to be proactive and set the table to create new jobs like coming into it. So that was something that was compelling. I thought that was pretty neat as well. And a little bit about some of the costs associated with this particular collective impact initiative. I don't necessarily think this is going to be indicative of all of them, but some of the costs you see are facilitation and coordination. Really, that's the backbone. For them, they needed to do a lot of research. So they needed data collection and analysis. Specifically, they hired a data analyst and researcher so they can actually make a case as they're trying to fund this and also bring more organizations into this collective impact initiative as it sort of grew. They wanted creative supportive services. Even at some point, they actually want to even hire some interns that are young to actually, be the change that they're trying to make, and actually have some entry-level jobs. A community engagement piece to where they were getting informed by the community. And also something that it's almost, at least in our arrangements, it's going to be part of all of our, things that we fund, is a consultant to actually help navigate the very beginning stages of it, set the table, help negotiate terms, and really having a professional there to, a neutral professional there to help set the expectations for everybody, so it's a clean and so the table's ready for them to actually get the work started and get the work done. And what are other things that are interesting to note about this? This one's also pretty interesting because it's such a big long. This one, I think it's a 10-year sort of time frame that they built it. It's such that there's on-ramps for more organizations to join. And they have it to where they have working committees and advisory committees, pretty complicated stuff. But when you actually have the support to have a consultant help sort of see that web of all these connections, and actually somebody to actually keep tab of these expectations, and really in a way that people can understand and people can actually be authentic and honest in what they can fulfill, it makes that trust base makes it exciting for people to join. And also people to join later on as they see the momentum building. And it's actually doing pretty well. It's been maybe going on for 2 years now. And it's pretty exciting to see some of the stuff that they've already come up with. And that's it.
Thanks, Otha. Before I jump into shared service agreements, I want to highlight something that Otha was talking about the role of consulting, particularly early in that process. A lot of these collaboration models that we'll look at today, either it sounds like, oh yeah, we could totally do that, or it's like, holy cow, I have no idea how we would even begin going about doing that. But either way, it can be really useful to have that neutral third party involved in the process. And the way I like to think about it is that every organization involved is its own entity, and then the collaboration itself is also an entity, and that every entity needs an advocate. And so if the organization's leaders are the advocates for their organizations, having a neutral consultant be the advocate for the collaboration as an entity itself can be really powerful in setting an equitable table. So if you're thinking about what role consulting can play in this, a lot of it has to do with that neutrality and having the expertise of knowing how all of these different partnership options work together. But thinking specifically about shared service agreements, so these are like the middle space in the integrated spectrum. So Otha was talking about the non-integrated or loosely affiliated organizational partnerships, things like movements and networks, where the organizations are retaining their separate status, but doing some work together. And then we're going to get a little bit later into when organizations really like become one thing and really thoroughly combine themselves. But shared services are right in the middle. We can think about it also as like administrative collaborations rather than our collaborating in producing services or producing educational programming, but thinking about collaborating in how we do the office work. And organizations are remaining fully separate, but they're working together on certain tasks. So our hope in all of this, and we know there are a lot of text on these slides, and we're not expecting you to like read and process everything that's on the screen here, but our hope is that as you think about these collaboration types, it might spark an idea of how you might want to think about working with another organization, or maybe give you some language to talk about a collaboration that you already have in process. So when we look at co-location, this is organizations working together within a space or sharing their space with each other. There are a lot of different ways to do this, but I think if we think about the difference between sharing space and leasing space from somebody else, it's really about how we share decision making. That's really what becomes a true collaboration rather than a landlord-tenant relationship. If we share responsibilities and decision making about a space. And we'll have an example to share in a couple minutes about what co-location can look like. Shared staffing. I knew we were not supposed to pick favorites, but for me, shared staffing is probably my favorite collaboration type because I think it's relatively straightforward to implement and has huge potential to increase capacity, increase expertise. So when we share a staff member between two organizations, that we're also creating what might be a new full-time position where there used to be a couple of gig positions or contract positions or part-time positions. So really supporting the nonprofit workforce development, but also letting a person, a role, whoever that role is, whether it's a finance person or a box office person or anything in between, really giving them the chance to learn their work more deeply by doing it at multiple organizations, then makes them better at the work they're doing for everybody. So there's a lot of exciting potential. I have an example of actually one of the funders that we work with that is a part of the MSI pooled fund. They share a program officer with another foundation. So that program officer gets to know the communities that both foundations are serving really well and gets better at their work all the time. And I'm also working right now with a group of producing theaters that are in the same neighborhood who are trying to figure out how to share a technical director, which is they've all struggled to consistently hire technical directors. And now, and they each have identified enough funds to support a part-time person, but working together, they think they can create a full-time job. So I don't have results on how that's going to go yet. It's just starting, but I think there's a lot of potential in how shared staffing models can be really effective. Back office collaboration is more in the universe of things like
Once you
HR,
start
finance,
publicly saying
IT,
that you might not.
and those pieces again, have lots of ways that two organizations can work together to share services, but also ways that organizations can essentially buy into a shared service model. So there are firms that provide HR, accounting, IT services collectively to multiple organizations. So a lot of ways to really both streamline your operations, but also get access to better support and services than you might be able to figure out on your own. And then fiscal sponsorship and agency, I think we're all pretty familiar with the ideas around fiscal sponsorship and things like Fractured Atlas for independent arts projects, sort of other ways that large entities can provide nonprofit status to smaller entities. And that is definitely a part of it, but there's also a lot of potential for administrative overhead support. So fiscal sponsorship doesn't just have to be a grants pass-through opportunity, although it can be that. It can also be a way to tap into another organization's HR services, payroll processing, accounting support. Lots of those back office collaboration options can come through fiscal sponsorship. And an organization doesn't have to be just a fiscal sponsor in order to be a fiscal sponsor. A large dance company could sponsor a small dance company, for example. Any nonprofit can be a fiscal sponsor for another organization. So there's a lot of potential impact there as well. But we will go on to the next slide because I will talk about this stuff all day long. And I want to share a video of a couple of leaders who are sharing space in Chicago. And I just love the way they talk about their collaboration. So we'll pause and share this example.
So my name is Angela Munguia. I am the executive director of AMP Advancing Nonprofits, and we are a capacity building organization that supports Black and Latinx-led nonprofit organizations on the South and the West sides of Chicago, build capacity and infrastructure within an anti-racist framework.
I'm Rosie Drumgoole. I'm the CEO of Chicago Cares. Been with the organization for about 14 years. And our mission is to mobilize volunteers to build a stronger, more unified Chicago.
Our relationship with Chicago Cares actually started as our fiscal sponsor. So AMP is a pretty brand new organization. We're actually celebrating our 5-year anniversary in September. And Chicago Cares was our fiscal sponsor for 3 years.
And so last year, or this year, as of January 1st, we are no longer fiscally sponsoring them. They are their own organization, which is amazing. But as part of that process, and coming out of the pandemic, so in 2020, we actually got rid of our office space. So we had spent a long time being a downtown organization. We had offices in a couple different places downtown. And so when 2020 hit, it just didn't make sense financially for us to continue to have office space that nobody could work from. And so we got rid of our office space, and a couple of years later, we did some co-working space with AMPed and with Chicago Cares in a smaller office on the west side in the North Lawndale neighborhood. And so that was kind of our testing ground. That was sort of us being like, hey, let's see if we can, coexist at this place. And so it seemed to work pretty well. And so as, we were looking for office space, AMPed also said, they were also looking for office space. And so it just kind of made sense to continue to partner in that way and think about like what we could get together that might be a better investment than what we could get apart.
What does it look like to continue to share a space, but to get a space that meets all of our needs, both programmatically and strategically, but also just like culturally. And so we found a beautiful space. And I think the ways in which it's been coming together, it's been less than a year in this new space. And so there's definitely a lot of growing and a lot of, figuring things out as we go. But I think at the center of it, I would say that there are two things that sharing space presents us with. From the administrative and kind of like logistical side of things, it saves us money. We could never, speak for ourselves. I don't know what Rosie would have said, but we could never afford the rent of the space that we have on our own, or we would have had to severely compromise other areas of our organizational budget in order to be able to have what we have. It allows us strategically to think about how we use space to push forward our strategy and our mission of providing capacity to other nonprofits. And we think about space as capacity.
Another thing for us was that we really wanted to prioritize being in a neighborhood on the south or west side. We didn't want to be downtown. One, the real estate there is expensive. And two, it's just not values aligned for either one of us.
And so to me, at the end, it's just the decision-making is truly about having mutual understanding of each other's priorities, understanding that, sometimes those things are going to shift. So having the grace and the flexibility, being honest about, how the decisions that we're making about the space affect staff members on both sides, and what are the ways in which we can, how do we message things so that everyone is on the same page? And then finding opportunities to find connection. We are different. We do different things for work, but we also have a lot of similarities and a lot of similar values. And I think that the value system is what makes it work the most. I think, Rosie and I have talked about whether we use this as kind of like a pilot for us to be able to say in the future, would we recommend this to other organizations? And is there a blueprint or, like a checklist that we can say, if you decide you want to do this, these are the things you want to talk about. These are the things you want to find out to make sure it's a good fit. And I think values is one of those things. You know, the other logistical things here and there, just like in any roommate situation, you can figure that out, right? But when it comes to the values of an organization, and how we want to communicate and what it is that we want to do, I think that's really where, at the heart of it, where it is that it makes it work for us.
What I love about this example is it makes it clear how strategic partnerships, while yes, they're administrative transactions and they're about the business model, they're really about how we manifest the values of an organization into the way our business model is structured. And there's some really exciting potential to do that collaboratively. So I will turn it back over to Otha to talk about what integrating organizations looks like.
I'm gonna
Integrating.
actually hop in
Yeah,
here.
I think Steph's going to
Yeah.
jump in there. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so integrated organizations, this is going to be where it's really more of the marriage that you're going to see for some of these models. So first off, we have joint ventures, and this is a business arrangement where two or more organizations are creating a new entity. And it's really to pursue a specific project or business activity. So their specific programs are still happening, but this is kind of another piece to that. In these types of relationships, each partner is contributing assets and sharing with the risks and rewards, and really working through setting them up together and figuring out putting their assets into it to make something that's going to be best for both. Then we have asset and program transfers, which is kind of exactly what it sounds like. So it is the transfer of assets from one organization to another. With this, it could be property, equipment, intellectual property. What we'll often see is there might be an organization that was running a program. Maybe they have multiple different programs and they've done their strategic plan and decided that, hey, this one program no longer really fits with the direction we want to go. And so they might approach partners to see who are doing similar work or who would be interested in taking on that program and actually transfer the program to that other organization. So with that, it would be the staff often come with that program and the curriculum and everything that goes into it. And then we have mergers and acquisitions, which I think it's really, where the organizations fully get married. Here we are seeing two or more organizations that are combining to form one single entity. The merger acquisition can kind of be used interchangeably or are often used interchangeably, and folks set up the actual setup, whether they decide to combine and both dissolve their EINs and make a new entity, or if they decide where one organization acquires the other, that's usually a discussion, with those third-party consultants, their legal team, to determine really what's going to make the most sense, what's going to be the easiest to set up and work the best in terms of setting up the merger and acquisition. But what we see here is mergers are really used to expand reach, broaden service delivery, achieve greater efficiency. So organizations will often, a lot of times it's about maybe being able to have a continuum of services for those or for the communities that they serve, or expanding into a new geography. There's a lot of reasons that mergers can really enhance impact of organizations. So I'm going to share a quick video about a merger. So this is Evanston Rebuilding Warehouse and Rebuilding Exchange, who are two grassroots material reuse and workforce training organizations in Chicago that merged.
I'm Ina Gutierrez. I'm the executive director of the Rebuilding Exchange. I was hired in 2018 as the executive director of the Evanston Rebuilding Warehouse. I was hired as the first director after the founder. And at the time we were $800,000, 8-person staff organization. that had a mission to reuse building materials, reduce construction waste, and train and support folks seeking building trades careers. So it was very early on in my tenure that I was looking for partners, and we work with everybody. If you've ever met the Rebuilding Exchange, we will work with you in whatever capacity, because we all do something different, and it takes a village to build a more sustainable community. So I started in 2018. In 2019, I had met with the executive director who was interim at the time, Jillian Paston, for the Rebuilding Exchange. We were definitely friends. There weren't that many of us in the space. We would refer customers to each other's stores. We would share educational workshop materials, like definitely allies in the field. And we were both small, struggling grassroots organizations. And so we struck up a conversation around, like, what would it look like to think about working together in some capacity? The first question was mission impact. Can we grow the impact in our community? The second question was, can we achieve efficiencies of scale through partnership? And then thirdly, can we be more financially sustainable? Social enterprise, especially nonprofit employment social enterprise, is no joke. You are balancing mission, what we call the tension of mission and margin, every day. You're running businesses and you're doing mission work. That's really hard. And so those were the three questions that we set out to answer. And by October of 2020, we came to the board jointly, our boards, the collective group, and said, the world has imploded. And so why not just merge and put it back together? And that's what we did. In 2022, we increased the number of people we served by 100%. We went back from 35 people served to about 100 in 2022. We'll stay at that level. We think about building materials reuse. We divert more than 3 million pounds of building materials from landfills every year, reach 2,000 people in educational workshops. So everything not only doubled, but doubled plus, as the ability to have 2 locations to be able to streamline program operations and really grow impact. The second is really efficiencies of scale. So I don't run the store anymore. I have a director of social enterprise, a person whose job it is to focus on the business. And she is a serial entrepreneur who does this really well. And so putting the right people in the right roles at the right time has been really important to us. And so I would say yes. And then financial sustainability. We have grown. This year, we'll end the year at a $3.25 million budget. And next year, we're projecting 3.75. So the budget continues to grow. The philanthropic opportunities continue to grow, and our business continues to grow. It is still hard, to be clear, still hard, especially coming out of the pandemic and lots of other economic contexts, which I know we all deal with on the daily, but it's exciting to be at this scale. It's exciting to have 35 employees and to make plans that not only impact my Evanston community, where I live and still work, but the broader Chicagoland area.
Okay, so a few things that stand out to me about this example is first that the executive directors had a positive relationship with each other already. With all of these types of strategic partnerships, we find trust is really key. It's one of the biggest components, and oftentimes either a lot of time needs to be spent building trust if that existing relationship isn't there already, or when leaders go into it and already have worked together, already know each other, it can move the process forward a little bit faster. Another thing is just the programmatic growth. So in this situation, it's a 1 + 1 = 3. And I think that's something oftentimes people are looking for when they're working with doing mergers and acquisitions.
I'm Ina Gutierrez. I'm the executive director of Ina Gutierrez.
Okay, over to you.
All right, cool. So now we're going to get into some of the most common reasons, well, what catalyzes organizations to seriously consider these sustained collaborations. Mind you, we know that in this world, groups organically collaborate short term and form good networks, strong networks to where they might share resources here and there. But it does actually take a pretty big step to want to actually do something long-term with agreements. It's a big deal. And actually it's a lot of, often it might not be even be the right time, for an organization to do that for a variety of reasons. But things that often catalyze or push organizations to seriously consider that is this list that you see here, starting with leadership transition. And we have this at the top because this is, in my experience, at least the most, maybe the most common, not necessarily the most common, at least in our experiences, but it's usually the most urgent. Like when this happens, it's typically, there's some sort of urgency there, particularly if they weren't necessarily planning on needing to transition. So there's no plan on transition. This happens so often, in fact, that Nonprofit Sustainability Initiative, we were just supporting sustained collaborations for 8 years until we noticed this correlation that so strongly that we actually started an executive transition fund for LA County nonprofits, because so many of them, they thought the only choice they had was to merge often or be acquired or something like that, to where if they had some support, with that executive transition piece, maybe they can still continue. But needless to say, like this is the number one reason that we see, and it can be hard to replace a very dynamic, charismatic leader that's good at fun, that's good at like all the things, and even more so if they're a founder, and even more so if they have all this talent and they and their salary is not necessarily at the market rate and that's competitive. So bringing somebody in, seeing that sort of budget gap can be very intimidating to a board. And even if it's an organization, like often where there's maybe only 2 to 3, 1 to 5, one, employee, leadership transition really is one of those existential events that is inevitable in the life cycle of every organization. But it's something that there is a woeful lack of support for in philanthropy. And it is, the number one cause for organizations to want to look towards their peers to see how they can continue their mission. Anything else y'all would like to add to leadership transition?
I'll just call out, I think when we think about the role of partnerships beginning in strategic planning is something I'm seeing more of. And I have this dream where every strategic planning process that a nonprofit goes through includes a conversation about collaboration. So I think the world of strategic partnerships and sustained durable collaborations are a whole pile of tools that nonprofits can use to build more resilient models, to increase the work that they're doing, achieve the goals that they're setting out. And when we think about them during the strategic planning process, we can look at them as the sort of menu of tools that we can choose from. And while as Otha talked about the role of the urgency of leadership transitions leading to these conversations, sometimes strategic planning or strategic partnership work comes from a point of crisis, but we see more and more this work coming from a place of opportunity. And the more we incorporate it into our strategic planning work and our regular conversations on the day-to-day, the more we normalize the idea of multiple ways that organizations can succeed together, but also just get a lot more comfortable with the slate of tools available. So I'm excited to see more of this happening during strategic planning.
Yeah, I'll just add that one thing I've seen is that, as an organization is growing and really trying to make sure that they're designing programs to meet the needs of the folks that they serve, sometimes they think about adding things on, and you might think, well, am I going to build that in-house or might I buy that or find it? And I think more and more organizations are seeking to buy and to bring in another group that might already do that very thing to become a part of a larger framework so that they can share that coordination, efficiency, and streamlining, rather than having these pixelated environments with all these different organizations doing different things. So when there are opportunities to, if in your strategy, you're setting forth that there's something else you want to do, and you can figure out a way to partner to do that in a long-term formal way, you're going to get to your end result faster because there's already another group that's out there that might have already built something and really thought about how to do it and built the systems around it. I just wanted to share that. I don't know if Steph, if you have anything else you want to say about when we see these emerging.
Yeah, I'll hop in. I think another time is when we do see changes in funding. So when there's either a new funding stream or that's a new funding opportunity that's available, and organizations can come together and really figure out, hey, how can we come together to be able to access this? Or on the flip side, and more often what I see is when funding streams change to the negative and are no longer available, and an organization recognizing that they need to change their revenue model, and what might make the most sense is to partner with someone else who might already have a diverse revenue kind of portfolio and ways that they're fundraising. And so that can be one of those times when folks start thinking about this.
Yeah, we can actually go back to the other one.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm gonna add another thing
Oop.
On it that's not directly on it, but that can lead to a lot of these different things. And that's just systemic policy change. If you have even something that can be good for the whole, might be tough for a small nonprofit, like a raise in minimum wage. Or in California, I think in 2018, we had changing the definition of an independent contractor. That was existential for a lot of small nonprofits, to where they had to actually hire on staff or try to figure that out. Those are other, and they didn't have necessarily the administration to infrastructure to do that. Those are other things that can lead to some of these things. And those are often things that you can see coming down the pipeline. So at least you have some time to prepare and strategize to say, okay, how can we actually be resilient to this, our impact be resilient to this upcoming change in policy that we're pretty sure is going to have a big effect on our bottom line or on our sustainability.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So thinking about the general process of developing these strategic partnerships, obviously this graphic does not give you all of the nuance and detail and everything that goes into it. And really, despite our straight line arrows there, it is definitely a nonlinear process. There is a lot of bends and twists in those arrows in real life. But I wanted to give a sense of sort of generally how we think about the process of developing partnerships, and thinking about what we call our pre-grant readiness, or we sometimes call it the pre-exploratory phase. That's when we're working with one organization. So thinking for yourself as your organization, what are you thinking about as you consider working with another organization? What do you bring to the table? What are you hoping a partner will bring to the table? What are the vision, values, culture pieces that you really need in a partner? We have certainly done some exploratory processes with organizations that end up not moving forward because of a values culture misalignment, and understanding your own values and culture in that pre-exploratory phase can really help to clarify what you're looking for in a partnership. But there's also then that like big organic messy process of making friends, that one of the most common questions I get asked in this phase is like, how do I find a partner? Sort of, who do I partner with? And there's no easy answer for that. Certainly, and we'll share how to get some more resources about this, but there are ways that folk can help to set up some systems for getting to know other organizations that might be good collaborators for you, and recognizing that no collaboration is going to be the same, and not every collaboration is exactly the right collaboration at the right time, but preparing to get to put out into the universe the idea that you're interested in collaborating with other organizations, meeting other leaders, getting to know their work, getting to know their systems, getting to know your own work and systems. So that's all that like readiness work. I just think of it as like, the work we do on ourselves before we think about moving in with a roommate. Like, how do we get ourselves ready to be in right relationship with another organization? And then once we get into the exploratory or planning process, that's really where we work out all of the nuts and bolts from everything that you might think about in a traditional merger integration, something like financial or legal due diligence, negotiating contracts or MOUs. All of that is in there, but so is really understanding mission values alignment, really digging into the format of the partnership, which is when having a consultant who with expertise in this area can be really helpful. Like, are we doing an asset transfer with dissolution? Are we doing an acquisition? What's the difference? What does it mean? Which one do we want? Really, and kind of like with a commercial real estate contract, there is no standard in any of this. Everything is up for negotiation, discussion, revision. I think about my work oftentimes as being like a server at a restaurant with no printed menu. Folks come to me like, hey, I'm feeling like this thing. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that's called this, or it could be done this way or this other way, or you could put this thing on it. So there are really a lot of options, and all of that exploration gets thought about during this planning process. And then that process generally ends with, the signing of a partnership agreement. Karen mentioned earlier that these partnerships are the kind of thing that require often board sign off, legal contract, sort of official documentation. And sort of once that documentation is agreed to and in place, that's when we begin the implementation phase, which is where we really like put the wheels on the car and get everything in place to make the partnership thrive. So we're talking about things like integrating databases or combining the charts of accounts for integrated organizations. Or in less formal partnerships, they might be things like setting up a new HR policy for a shared staff person, or really working out, who buys the toilet paper in a shared space and how often. So those, the administrative logistical pieces that really set that partnership up to thrive. That's what we look at in implementation. And that phase, which can also include things like cultural integration. How do we create a cohesive board culture? How do we create a cohesive staff culture? So it's no longer us and them, but really truly a we. That work can take years. And I think that's the big takeaway. I joke that the tagline of the Mission Sustainability Initiative should be, it takes longer than we thought, because almost everyone I have met in this work has said that sentence to me in one form or another. It takes a long time. It moves at the speed of trust, but there are a lot of kinds of help available along the way. We'll hear from, you've heard from all of us working around the country in different ways, and we'll share some more resources on how to get in contact with us in for different kinds of help. But there are many organizations exploring these kinds of partnerships, and there are ways that y'all can help each other, and we can help provide those connections and support in this work.
Thanks, Kate. So just to kind of make sure it's clear, we're all from funds. We're all from different entities across the country, and we exist because we recognize that these types of collaborations are really challenging to create, and they require funding and resources and time. And we all fund at different amounts and in different ways, but we do share a lot of things in common. And I think more than anything, these basic principles of getting aligned with the right partners, where you have a shared vision and a shared purpose and shared values, and that we recognize that there is a process that you need to go through to make sure that you do find the right partners. At Austin Together, one of the things we really believe, and I think a lot of the other organizations believe this too, is not all partnerships and collaborations are the right ones. And going through a process and, dating for a while and exploring and then figuring out it's not the right partnership is not a failure. That's actually a success. We exist, and we're not like, oh, it didn't work, this isn't good. We exist to give you the space and opportunity to go through that. You'll end up learning a lot about who you are as an organization and what you do want and what your values are. So if you go through one of these and you don't end up in a collaboration, that is okay. However, as you can see from this slide, a lot of folks who go through these processes, and across all of the organizations in the Sustained Collaboration Network, we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of organizations to go through these collaborations. Many of them are successful, and they do end up with some form of collaboration. And as you can see, arts and culture organizations, which is not surprising to me, tend to be really successful. And I think that is because the way artists think and the way that we work, and it's just embedded in us to know how to share and collaborate. That's what we do every day. And so a lot of times, thinking about how to be more sharing, thinking about abundance, thinking about coming together, it's just kind of in our DNA. But as you can see, youth development organizations, arts and culture organizations tend to do really well as they go through these processes to figure out how they can, increase efficiency, improve impact, sustain their organizations through coming together. I think, Steph, if I'm not mistaken, we want to just go into Q&A. So we only have about 8 minutes, and I think we want to use the chat is probably the most efficient way. If anyone does have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. In addition, if you go to sustainedcollab.org, that's the website for our network, and you can find all of our funds there and contact us. Like I said, there's a fund for pretty much everywhere across the country, mostly thanks to the fact that Steph also oversees a fund that you can access if there's not a fund in your region. And that's through the Lodestar. What's the name of that one? Is that just the Lodestar Fund, Steph?
The SeaChange Lodestar Fund for
Okay.
nonprofit collaboration.
So if you're not in one of the cities that you see listed on our website, you can get in touch with that fund. But again, it's pretty rare to find these kinds of dollars that will help you go through things that you might not see otherwise. And more than anything, the expertise of many of these people on this call, as well as the consultants we work with, is worth a lot. So please, if you have any questions or feedback, put them in the chat and we can respond to you.
I'll also say that many of our funds do more than just funding. So we provide a range of conversations, consultations, programs. So certainly the dollars make a huge difference, but we can also connect you with lots of kinds of other resources. So don't hesitate to reach out, even if you're in a phase where you're just starting to think about these ideas and know there's going to be a price tag someday, but don't know what it is yet. We can be here for thought partnership as well.
I have a question that I could throw out to kind of get us started. I know we only have a few minutes, but I'm curious if anybody could talk about maybe a time when they had some folks come together to explore collaboration and it didn't come together, but there might have been other positive outcomes through the effort.
I can share an example, and there's actually one of the things I love about the Sustained Collaboration website is there are a bunch of case studies that we worked on collectively with a research team at Northwestern, and they're really well done. But one of them is the example that I'll share now about 2 film organizations in Chicago that were considering merging into one. And before they did the merger, they essentially did a pilot together of co-producing a film festival. And so through which I love just the idea of piloting collaboration, but through the process of doing that pilot, they learned that there was some really significant values misalignment of specifically around like how leaders engaged with staff members and sort of what that organizational culture looked like just wasn't aligned between the 2 organizations. So they produced the festival and ended up walking away and not continuing with their merger exploration. But through that, the organization, the sort of bigger of the 2 organizations, has since explored a whole bunch of other partnerships. So there are many ways in which I see this successful. One is that we specifically really look at the goals in our grant making as learning objectives. They're not deliverables. They're not, you have to be able to check this box on your report, but that they're, what are you setting out to learn and what do you need to do that learning? And this organization learned a ton during their exploration, specifically around clarifying their own values and how those values manifest in their work. But also it taught them a lot about partnership strategy. So now they're exploring more partnerships and different kinds of ways to work together with organizations. So we're seeing a lot more collaboration come out of what might look like a failed collaboration attempt the first time.
I've got one more question. I don't know if anyone has an example of, have you seen any collaborations that are really specifically cross-sector, maybe where an arts organization and an organization in a completely different sector found a meaningful way? It doesn't have to be an arts as an example, but just in the context of who we're speaking with today. Does anyone have an example of that and how it worked and what the challenges and opportunities might have been?
I just met one last week, but I want to make space if others have more fully baked examples to share.
I don't have one that's coming to mind.
The one I just met last week, and I don't know how it's going to go, but there was a human service organization is looking at acquiring a arts education organization that they have been working together as collaborating partners for a while with the arts organization, essentially providing, therapeutic and arts process as part of the human service organization's offering. So they've been like co-producing these art healing through arts programs. And as the human service organization is looking to ramp up that side of their work, and the arts organization is going through a leadership transition, they're looking at just like moving the entire arts organization into the human service organization to be a part of their programming, which I think is really interesting. So I'm excited to see how that works. Also, I think this might go without saying, but sometimes we share really specific examples that name who we're talking about, and sometimes we're super vague about who we're talking about. And that is not because we can't remember who we're talking about. A lot of us have a real sort of firm confidentiality around the conversations that we have. So when I am meeting with an organization or a pair of organizations, it's important that they know that no one is going to hear about their collaboration from me until they're ready. So we won't name names, especially things like if you're exploring a merger and you're not ready to loop your funders or your board chair or somebody into that conversation yet, it's important to us to maintain that. So when we're being vague, that is why, but it also means that we will protect your confidentiality when you call us if you're not ready to talk about your collaboration publicly yet.
Does anyone else that's on the call have any other comments or feedback for us? Like, is this resonating? Does this seem like something that you could imagine your organization doing? Do you still have a lot of questions and you're not clear? There are no dumb questions. This is all, for many people, new information in a new way, a new strategy to think about.
Yeah, I'm curious if anyone like learned something new today and is excited to think more about any of the things we've talked about. And if not, that's okay.
Hi, my name is Sanaz Khudra, and I work in the Northeast region, and I've heard a lot of great things that you guys have shared. Some things I knew, some things said in a different way. So I really appreciate what you guys are talking about and sharing and inspiring people to think about. I think for me, some things that constantly come up is how do we make these collaborations exist beyond personalities as leadership changes come and go? So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, personalities is sometimes the reasons collaborations don't work out and it's not the right time. Leadership or the board, that actually that does come up. I would say like having a strong neutral facilitator from the outset, somebody that both sides sort of trust, to really set expectations, to set the agreement, and even to gauge to see if it's like the right time to come to make that. So treating the exploration as its own goal rather than just looking at like, oh, we're going to get a merger, but like treating like, hey, this exploratory trust-based portion is it a goal in of itself to really see, like, I think Kate mentioned like walking away isn't a sign of failure, because, it could be a sign of success knowing like right now isn't the time to really explore this. And that knowledge actually is pretty valuable. So you won't be like really figuring that out. But I would say, in my opinion, having a neutral facilitator is like invaluable, and somebody who's experienced who can really handle personalities and can really get their weigh their sort of opinion on like things as well.
I'll also add that the very act of formalizing a collaboration sometimes is designed so that it's not reliant on interpersonal relationships. So if two executive directors are buddies and they're referring folks to each other all the time, that's great. But when one or the other of them moves on, having the structural partnership between the organizations like written down and codified means that it can be durable after a transition.
I mean, kind of just to piggyback on that, I actually think our processes in general do kind of counter what you're talking about. When people have to start applying for something together and getting a consultant to come in and do the due diligence, it starts to kind of make it less personal and make it more institutional and formal. I think a lot of mergers that we've worked on and a lot of collaborations would not have happened had we not had this formality of process that people went through. So I think that in and of itself can kind of get through. I will say, however, one thing I've been seeing a lot of lately are maybe formal collaborations that have existed for a long time and they grew out of one group of people, and then 10, 15 years later, there's a whole other group of people trying to sustain them and they can't quite get back to the roots as to why they even existed in the first place. And so we've also been doing some work to kind of help with some refresh, like let's go back to square one. What's our shared purpose? Why are we doing this? Because again, to your point, like if it was two folks who had a good relationship who started something and then they're completely out of the picture, sometimes some of that can be lost in time and in the memory of the organization. I think we're at time. We have so much more information and so many more stories that we could share. And I know there's a evaluation that Lisette has put into the chat for folks to fill out to give feedback for what we did today. I know we are all open to being contacted. So if anybody would like to talk further, learn more on any level, it could be a quick call, it can be whatever you'd like. I know we're all open to that. Lisette, I don't know if you have any other kind of closing out remarks you'd like to make.
No, thank you, Karen, and thank you to all of our speakers today for sharing. I'm putting the survey back in the chat, the recording, and any resources, including how to get in touch with our speakers, will be sent to you all via email, maybe soon. And so thank you all for coming and for joining. And I hope that we get to have a follow-up conversation, and maybe some of you all would have started your own partnerships by then. So thank you all again. And I hope to see you all soon. Bye.